Troy Helming. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Peter. Good to be here.
So you got to tell me about EarthGrid. It looks like a revolutionary idea. I can say I've never heard anything like this before. So you got to tell the audience. I'm sure everyone's excited to hear.
You bet. Yeah. So about 8 years ago, I came up with this idea. I invented a plasma tunnel boring robot. So imagine a small tractor with lightsabers on the front, vaporizing all the rock and soil, and a Mandalorian jetpack blowing out all the little bits of rock out the back.
Nice.
So, by the way, my teenage son helped me with that. Anyway, so yeah, it's a way to dig tunnels much faster and cheaper than conventional mechanical means. We use energy. The plasma is about 8,000 degrees Celsius. So it's a non-contact way and environmentally benign. We don't use chemicals or drilling mud or anything like that. But, mainly it's because it's faster and cheaper.
Yeah, that is awesome. And it solves a big problem, obviously, because I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we need more power grid. We need more power lines to be deployed. But we hear this word NIMBY, which I understand people don't want the power lines in their backyard. So is this a solution for that?
It is. And in fact, that's why I came up with the idea. Maybe I should tell the origin story. Do you want to hear that?
That'd be awesome. Yeah.
All right. So in 2016, I guess it was, we had a solar farm. I've been in the solar and wind business for nearly 30 years, since the 1990s. And a solar farm that we had been developing for a couple of years got downsized, or we had to downsize it by 75%. We had a contract, with the utility to sell all this power, and we had to cut it down by 75% because the grid couldn't handle it. Had we been able to get 3 kilometers away, 2 miles underneath protected wetlands, creeks, and things like that, we could have gotten to a stronger part of the grid. But the cost to do that killed that idea. And then getting a permit to go over all the wetlands would have taken a couple of years, and we would have lost our contract. Anyway, so we were upset, drowning our tears over beers at a happy hour in San Francisco. And one of my solar engineers, he's a former Navy SEAL, he's bragging to his girlfriend about how his SEAL team used to practice entering enemy ships by going underwater and cutting through the side of the ship with a plasma cutting torch. He was like, yeah, that thing was over 20,000 degrees. It'd take your arm off. We're all like, dude, you're such a badass. And anyway, and so I popped up in the middle of the night that night, thinking to myself, 20,000 degrees. I bet that's hot enough to go through rock. Researching, hot enough to vaporize it. Surely somebody's doing this. Looking, no, couldn't find anybody using plasma for tunneling, although I found some old papers from the 1970s by Department of Energy, did some work on it. And anyway, I just couldn't stop thinking about the idea. Hired a engineering firm to do feasibility study, and fast forward to today, we've built multiple prototypes, have our full size machine operating and making money. And it's pretty exciting. But it's power line interconnection challenges. And I guess I'll say one last thing. Sorry to have such a long answer, but I wrote a book about 20 years ago called The Clean Power Revolution. Please, nobody buy it. It'll put you right to sleep. But in the book, I talk about how we need 270 new transmission lines to unlock all of the, cheap wind and solar and convert America to lower cost energy. And we've built like 2 in the last 20 years. Because again, NIMBYs, nobody wants them. And bananas build absolutely nothing anywhere, nowhere, anytime. People don't want this stuff built. And so going underground solves all of that.
Yeah, amazing. Now, you mentioned making money. You got to tell us about your business model. Are you licensing the tech? Are you doing your own projects? A little bit of both? How does it work?
So we have these 2 cute names that we've trademarked called Boom and Badass. And thanks. So Boom is where we're spending more of our time and effort. That stands for build, own, operate, and maintain. So the business model is to not sell the machine or lease it or rent it or even license it, but to have our crew always operate our machines. So a Boom model, when we own it, so if we own the tunnel or the trench, because sometimes we're putting in a trench and maybe the soil layer is thin, but there's bedrock underneath and it's difficult to grind that out, and you can't use dynamite or jackhammers in some areas. So anyway, using plasma for trenching or tunneling, but we would own the project and then sign contracts with utilities or internet service providers or water companies or whatever. And then their infrastructure would go in the tunnel or the trench, and we would collect a toll, just like a highway toll for, decades. So it's a great business model because we own the infrastructure. You can think of us like underground real estate in that case, and we're leasing out space or charging a toll on the commodities flowing through. So that's boom. Badass, save the best for last, is boring and drilling as a simple service. And in that case, again, our crew operates the machines and we simply charge per meter or cubic meter of material removed.
Wow. I know people that don't like both of those business models, especially the first one when it comes to having infrastructure. There's so much capital out there seeking good infrastructure projects, particularly with long-term predictable revenue streams. I tell our clients all the time, it's more about predictability than it is about return in today's world, because there's just so much capital looking for predictable fixed returns.
100% agree with you, Peter. Yeah, there's more capital out there than there are good quality projects. Yeah, I've learned that. I mean, I've utilized kind of a niche area of financing called project finance that I know you're familiar with since the 1990s, developing wind farms and solar farms. You get a 20-year contract to sell the power from a solar or wind project. There's plenty of capital sources out there, debt, tax equity, and equity that'll sign up for that all day long. And we're doing essentially the same thing. We get a big, uh, ISP or Amazon Web Services or Microsoft or Google or somebody that says, yeah, we want to buy the data, the bandwidth on our fiber in our lines or the power or the water or whatever, then it's pretty easy to find that capital. In fact, we've closed recently a large project finance facility for over $1 billion worth of our projects that we're developing right now, our boom projects.
Well, that is great news. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I know that project finance investors have to believe in the technology. They're very tech risk adverse. So how did you get them over the finish line, comfortable with the tech? Did you guys have to do a prototype or do a demonstration in order for them to be comfortable?
Yes and yes. It took about a year, but yeah, independent engineering firms had to write up, technical papers, and we had live demonstrations of our technology where, folks would fly out and see it operating in the San Francisco area, including one of our customer job sites up in Altamont Pass, where, the first wind farms in the world were built. There's a really old, like 55-year-old wind farm that's no longer operating, and it's a repower project where they're going to replace all the old dilapidated turbines with modern ones, the big ones with the tubular towers rather than the lattice towers that look like ladders, and give birds a place to nest. The tubular towers, there's no place for birds to nest really. Anyway, so yeah, we used our tech out there to dig some trenches through the rock in the hills for power lines and fiber lines. And that was a great demonstration for our investors and our lenders that wanted to do their diligence.
No, that's great news. So $1 billion in projects. I think we're making a little bit of news here, hopefully. And do you know where those projects are going to be sited yet? Or are still the projects have to get additional development work?
Yeah, additional development work. Well, we've actually made a lot of progress. There's, let's see, one project that's pretty far advanced in Texas and two in California that I would consider kind of mid-stage development. We think we can start construction on the Texas project by next year, hopefully by the summer or fall at the latest. And the two California projects, one of them might be able to start construction at the end of next year, possibly 2025, and the second one, 25. And then there's a handful of other projects. And by the way, we've signed term sheets with, now I should point out on the project finance, three different parties. Two of them are, they still have some conditions precedent. And then one of them is fully closed, and we'll be able to start deploying capital on that one, hopefully shortly after the first of the year for that Texas project.
And that's great news. And I know in Texas, they built a lot of wind, but far from the load centers. Are you helping to facilitate that, or is it something else?
It's some of that. And you're right. Texas leads the nation in total installed wind power. And Texas this year and last year has been either number one or number two in new solar power additions. Solar is great because it matches up perfectly with, the summer heating load when everyone's running their air conditioners. The same sun that's making it so hot is generating electricity. So solar and wind have actually saved the grid in Texas. There's been some headlines to the contrary, but you look at the actual facts and the folks that have actually looked in, not the politicians, but the people that run the grid, and they're like, yeah, solar and wind have, and the batteries have really been saving it. So the first project in Texas, to answer your question, will make the grid more resilient, but the primary focus is adding more solar. We have over 2 gigawatts of solar being developed by a few customers of ours in West Texas. And we want to deliver that power to substations closer to the metropolitan areas in the north and central part of the state. So think of us like a big extension cord, basically.
Very cool. And of course, in West Texas, it's an amazing solar resource. As you get out towards El Paso, I don't know if you're going that far because I think it's off of ERCOT, but as you get in West Texas, boy, it's a really good solar resource.
It really is. Yeah. We're not quite that far west. We're still in ERCOT's area, but we are also exploring the notion of putting one of our tunnels up into the Panhandle, San Angelo area or something like that. It would have to be a DC line moving from the SP grid to the ERCOT grid to preserve the federal exemption from FERC jurisdiction in Texas. But, these are the kinds of things that our country needs as we're electrifying everything, our vehicles, our heating in our homes. Like in our home, my wife has asthma. So we took out our natural gas stove and replaced it with a really nice GE Cafe induction stove. And she no longer has to use her inhaler when we're cooking dinner.
Yeah, and so that's amazing. Electrification is huge. And then I'll bring up a big trend, which we're seeing, artificial intelligence. So with the proliferation of AI, the power requirements of data centers, both to existing data centers and the need to build new ones, is going through the roof. So we just see a bull market in power demand where we were really flat for so many years. That's what's amazing about how much wind and solar got built, is there really wasn't a huge amount of power demand increase in the 2010s. But now we're in a position where I think we're in a secular bull market for power demand that's going to last for maybe another 20 years, which is amazing. Great for your business. And I think great for the planet as we electrify more things.
Yeah, that's well said, Peter. You're absolutely right. The demand that we're hearing from data centers, we just started talking to ISPs and data center companies, and we knew it was pretty good, but I had no idea how strong the demand is. And that's the biggest challenge of AI compute and all of the other compute needs, edge compute and everything else out there. Many of them are struggling to find land with sufficient power and, data bandwidth. And of course, if they locate next to one of our tunnels or along one of our tunnels, we solve both problems.
Oh, that's great. So I'm sure you're going to have a lot of investors knocking on the door to finance this type of build out. It's extremely needed, and it solves a huge problem, as you say, that people don't want these power lines close by. I'll give a shout out to our state and our area. A lot of our power lines are buried here in Florida because of the hurricane risk. And in newer areas like where I live in Jupiter, most of the power lines are buried. So when the hurricane hits, we're back up and running. We have very little power outages. Down in Fort Lauderdale, where I grew up, it's about an hour away. It's an older area. If they get a hurricane, they might be out for 2 weeks or longer while the company PO restores all their power lines. So it's more than just the visual. Buried power lines are really important, I think, as we experience more climate related disasters.
Absolutely. It's interesting you mentioned that. Yeah. Florida Power and Light has been investing something like $1 billion a year to bury power lines. And they've been doing it for a long time. And so there's so many lines to bury. It's tens of thousands of kilometers, but they're making a steady progress, and data from them, data from utilities all over the country, including in the Midwest, where there's ice storms and tornadoes, and California and in Oregon and Colorado, where they're causing fires. I sit on the board of Power Delivery Intelligence Initiative, or PDI squared for short. But there's a bunch of data out there, and PDI squared's mission is to help utilities understand how much more reliable their grid will be if they bury their lines. And so a couple of quick examples. There's 10 times fewer truck rolls on lines that are buried. Because you don't need to send a truck to inspect or repair or whatever. If a branch is brushing against it, or, there's so many things, a squirrel or a traffic accident that knocks over a pole, all kinds of things. And about 9 times more reliable overall if lines are underground. And here's an interesting statistic. There's kind of a lot of data out there on percentages of the lines buried in Europe versus North America. And I found what I think is the most reliable source. Roughly 80% of the distribution lines in Europe are buried. What would you guess the percentage is in the US?
I bet it's 10% if we're lucky.
Wow. I'm impressed, Peter. It's 8%. So we're 10 times worse, but I think you were probably the closest that anybody's guessed on that.
I know because I've done a lot of road trips. When my son's in college now, but all growing up, we road tripped all over the US, and where we live, the power lines are buried. So I was always paying attention. No, they're buried here, but very few places are they buried. You just see them everywhere.
Yeah, it's wild. We need to do more of it, but infrastructure is crumbling in America. I think the latest report from the American Society of Civil Engineers gave us a C minus on our infrastructure, and that's water lines, sewer, stormwater, power lines, bridges, roads, blah blah blah, all the infrastructure. So it's difficult with the NIMBYs and the bananas to get stuff done or rebuilt, but we got to do it. We got to find a way to do it, and we're hoping to solve the problem. And I hope a 100 other companies, get formed out there to also come up with innovative ways to more rapidly improve our infrastructure.
And no, for sure. Speaking of other companies, are you licensing your technology to other companies? I think your business model number two maybe does that, or are you guys controlling all of the actual build out and developing it all?
Yeah, it's a good question. At this point, we're not licensing. We are, however, partnering with a number of large EPCs, engineer, procure, and construct companies, including, Quanta Services, Black and Beach, talking to Burns McDonnell and others, but Bechtel and so forth. But at the moment, our plan is to only have our crew operating. We have one machine built. We're building machines 2 and 3, and we've ordered the equipment to build machines 4 and 5. So hopefully by the end of next year, we'll have 5 machines out there. One of the reasons we want to operate the machine is we've been testing with prototype long time. That's many years. And, we have 7 patents, 120 something patent claims out there, but we have over 1,000 trade secrets. And what I mean by that is it's taken us years to figure out the right recipe for each type of rock or soil. There are a number of variables we can modify with not just the plasma, but our air squid, which blows cold air around the really hot, 8,000 to 20,000 degree plume. And the cold air helps cause a faster thermodynamic fracturing. So the temperature of both, the airflow rate of both, and I don't want to give anything away, but there's other variables, so we think it would take somebody at least 3 years, maybe 5 years to, try to duplicate that. And so we want to hold our trade secrets pretty close to the vest. So in a lot of cases with these big construction companies that, that have contracts that need to put in tunnels or trenches, we'll just come in as a subcontractor to them. They'll build the project and we'll do our little piece. They pay us on our badass model, per cubic meter removed. And we make a nice profit margin on that. And then they do everything else.
Gotcha. Yeah, it certainly makes sense. I tell people this all the time. I tell a lot of actually venture capitalists this that are very patent focused. Really, it's the trade secrets that you can protect yourself from others competing with you, even more so than the patents. Because a good patent put out there, people try to get around it. But ultimately, when you're operating in the field, you get amazing learnings. And the only way to get those is to actually go out there and do it. And there's not a lot of people that sign up to do that. So we're a huge fan of those kind of protections, making a business have a durable competitive advantage for the long run.
That's great. Yeah, we have a couple of groups taking a look at our IP portfolio, and the value of our trade secrets is rather high. And in fact, we've gotten 2 of them that have given us kind of indicative terms for a loan backed up with collateral of just our intellectual property. So it's pretty valuable already according to the market. So we feel pretty good about that.
That's amazing, and congratulations, because I know it's been a long road, and it definitely takes a while to stick through all those, especially early days when there's always a lot of doubters whether you can make it or not.
Yeah, exactly. There still are. In fact, I made a post on LinkedIn, and folks are welcome to check that out if they want. But I had read, I don't know, maybe 9 months ago, I read a blog post of another founder, and she was recounting how many pitches she had to give to investors. And here I am, I've had 6 exits, two of them, well, one of them has been a unicorn for a long time. The other one just hit unicorn status recently. So I'm a seasoned founder with multiple exits, a two-time unicorn founder, and yet it was difficult to raise money. So anyway, she said that she had 1,000 pitches to close out her pre-seed round. And I was like, wonder how many I've done. I bet I've done something close to that. And so back in May or June, we exported my calendar and did a search for all meetings with emails in capital or VC or pitch or investor or whatever. And it was about 1,800. And then recently did it again. It was over 2,000 pitches that I've had to give to close out both our pre-seed and our seed round over the last year and a half.
That's incredible. I came up a little in the gas turbine business, and they said in that business, nobody ever got fired for going with the OEM, right? And now in investor world, nobody ever gets fired for saying no. And I
Right.
really think LPs out there need to change how they look at it, because they really should be looking at how many deals their GPs said no to that turned out to be great deals. We are always, as investment bankers, we're always challenged by risk adverse funds. And we really try to focus on a small subset of funds where we know the guys get it. They just get it. They get founders, they get risk, they get what it takes to be successful. But wow, there are so many funds out there that are just hyper risk adverse. It is a challenge.
It is. And thank you for the work you're doing to try to change the thinking on that topic. But yeah, it's tough, especially this year. I do have to say last year was easier when we raised our pre-seed. We wanted to raise 2 million and we got 7 million of commitments last year. Said no to a few and raised about five and a half or six. This year we wanted to raise 15 million in our seed round. And the first, I don't know, 5, 6 months until roughly, I don't know, April-ish or so, it was not too bad. But then the Silicon Valley Bank collapsed and it got so much harder. And, I was ghosted or told no by over 97% of the VCs and investors I talked to. It's frustrating. You just have to have the stomach for it and just keep going. But we ended up raising just over 30 million. We oversubscribed it by 2x. And I feel humbled and honored that some of the marketplace gets it and they see what we're doing. And so we're able to get it done. But so any other founders out there listening or would be founders, just know that it takes the work and know that, every no you get, you're one closer to the next yes.
That's true. And I always tell people, make them tell you why. It's okay if they want to say no, but they got to tell you why, because then each time you're going to learn a little bit, hopefully, and be able to refine your pitch and get better.
That's a really good point. Some of the VCs and family offices that I really wanted on our cap table, when they turned me down or ghosted me, well, ghosting, there's nothing to do really. But if they turn me down, it's not the right fit at this time or whatever. And I've gotten some really nice turn downs for really good reasons, but some of them, they just say no. And I ask why, and usually they ghost me. They don't give me a reason why. So it's frustrating.
That part is tough. Tougher being a founder. When you're an investment banker, you can usually ask why, and they'll tell you, because they know they're going to have to deal with you again with another deal.
That's
So
a good point.
they won't tell you. I will say this year, a lot of the whys we've received, we've suspected that the real why has just been the market sucks. And that, the why a lot of times is an invented why, because the market's bad. Interest rates are going up. The IPO window is relatively closed. So people are waiting for the return to the risk on trade, which is interest rates easing again, the IPO window open. And then we feel like there's going to be a flood of deals getting done, because there's a lot of stalled deals, especially in the venture capital world. I don't think I've ever seen in my career as many as this year where they've
Interesting.
just got stalled.
Fascinating.
So, yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. That was a big deal. I think underreported in the general media, but I'm sure well reported out there in the Valley.
Yep.
But it was a huge deal. And I was personally surprised that we didn't see more challenges in the banking segment after that. But fortunately, it was relatively contained.
Indeed.
So, well, Troy, you've been bouncing around a little bit. I think you're our first guest ever calling in from a boat, from a seagoing vessel. Tell us about your boat.
Yep, sitting on our Chris Craft Calypso 35. It's got 3 engines on the back, and I'm a clean energy guy, so I a little bit guilty about even having this, but I put money down on all of the electric boats that I could find out there, and nobody can sell me one, at least not yet. So we had to do this. But the main reason why, I mean, I've always loved boating. I grew up boating with the family and water skiing and stuff like that. But my son goes to a private school in Marin County. We live in Point Richmond, which is just north of Berkeley in the San Francisco area. And the traffic on the bridge is so bad. Sometimes it takes an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes just to get him, to school. And it's only 20 something miles, but the traffic is just horrible. And so I'm like, you know what? It's soul crushing traffic. I think thanks to Elon for coining that term, if he was the first. But anyway, and so I was like, I see people and I know people who use boats for water taxis or to get to commute, to get to the city or wherever across the bay. And I was like, maybe that's something we could do. So tried it out. And sure enough, we can get over there in about 10 or 12 minutes. So it saves so much time getting him to school. That's the main reason. But of course, I don't golf. My co-founder, Scott at EarthGrid, he doesn't golf. And what do you do in the San Francisco area? You spend time on the bay. So we have a friend who has a sailboat right here in the same marina. So sometimes we go sailing, but we take our employees, our customers, our board out on the boat, and it makes for a really nice time to chill. Being on the water helps the mental health element of being a founder, which is an important thing. It's not easy being a founder of any company. So keeping us calm and relaxing and unwinding on the water is super helpful.
Absolutely. I can definitely align with you on that one. We do a lot of boating here in Jupiter, Florida. And
Yeah, same.
we don't hear of it as much in California. So hats off to you for getting on the water out there in the Bay Area. I know it's beautiful.
Yeah, and a lot of other boats here on the marina, as you can see, for those who are watching and listening.
Yeah, very cool. And we talk about something called reverse seasickness, meaning that you have not been on the water in long enough. And it's exactly what you say about it. It's really great for your mental health. And same with me. I started early in my career playing quite a bit of golf, which I found was not good for my mental health because it's a very frustrating game. Whereas being on the water, I find is great for the mental health.
100%.
So, well, Troy, this has been awesome. This has been Troy Helming with EarthGrid. Really appreciate you being on. How can the audience get in touch with you? Any investors or others that would like to reach out?
Yeah, sure. I'll just give my email and my social media. Email is simply Troy, TROY at earthgrid.io for input output. We're a grid, inputs and outputs. Or Solar Ninja Troy is my social media handle on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and so forth. And you can find me by name on LinkedIn. So thanks so much for having me, Peter. This is a great opportunity. Really appreciate you bringing me on the show.
Troy, thanks so much. It's been great.